Savvy Central Radio, drawing out the best from our guest with your host, Christina Nitchman.
Our sponsor for today is Regina Huber, speaker, coach, and founder of Transform Your Performance. She helps businesswomen move into their positive yes energy and find their magnetic power and confident presence so they can step into the spotlight and into their role as leaders. Her clients include entrepreneurs and corporate executives who want to move to the next level of their business or career faster and more powerfully, and of course to create more wealth for their companies and themselves. To find out more about Regina and her business, visit transformyourperformance.com. Hello everyone and welcome to Savvy Central Radio. This is your host, Christina Nitchman. Each week, Savvy runs weekly broadcasts providing entrepreneurs and successful individuals a platform to express their dreams, hopes, lessons learned, expertise, and wisdom with the world. Our guest today is Scoggins, author of The Journey Principles, 10 Simple Steps for a Life Journey That Matters, and founder of the Journey Principle Institute. Stephen teaches others that they can take all their adversities and turn them into tools for a happier, healthier, and wealthier life. In his book and educational program, Stephen bears witness to the amazing grace that transcended him from being virtually homeless and ready to take his life to being a respected and valued multi-million-dollar business owner. Find out more about Stephen at StephenScoggins.com. Hi, Stephen. Welcome to Savvy Central Radio. How are you?
I'm doing so good. Thanks for having us.
I'm excited to have you join us today. You've had quite a journey, Stephen, from coming from deep financial straits to considering suicide at one point to ultimately having a renewal of faith in God. Share with us your entire journey and how you came to finding your true calling.
The entire journey? I'm not sure if you have enough time.
Okay. All right. Please start.
You know, it's funny. I realized that a person's calling is actually hidden in their passions. Mm-hmm. You know, our passions reoccur over and over again as we kind of live life, and a lot of us kind of ignore them, and we don't really pay much attention to them. You know, one of the first things we do when we bring a new team member on the Journey Principle side is we actually sit down and say, well, what are your top 5 passions? What are the things that you would do for free if you absolutely could? Mm. And we try to take that information and try to, you know, figure out a way to help them do just that, but also get paid for it. So, you know, they're hidden in the positive things that we think about that we can't shake. You know, the desire to raise a family, desire to build a business, desire to serve a community. Mm-hmm. You know, for me, I enjoyed, you know, just giving encouragement, truth, and learn wisdom that, you know, from those around me. And I don't know, I just decided to focus on growing. And as I grew, I started seeing my calling with each step. The easiest way was to just focus on the personal growth and development. So that's how I kind of accidentally stumbled on my calling. So that's how we try to teach everybody to get theirs as well.
And that's great because I think I told you before we got started with our interview that a good portion of our listeners and past guests are people that weren't necessarily thinking of being business owners or any shape or form. They had a crisis happen, something big happened in their life, they lost their job, they got sick, their kids went off to college, and they thought, now what? What do I do with my life? And they stumbled upon starting a business. And sometimes even the first business they start is even not their calling or their passion. And it's like it's a travel. It's not a journey that ends in one day. It takes a lifetime.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you know what I like, Stephen? You mentioned passion, that it comes from discovering what your passions and desires are, because I had heard a man say that he studied etymology and that the true meaning of desire is of the Father, of mm-hmm. God the Father. And that would make sense. So that if any desire is deep in your heart, it is put there by God the Father. So it's him telling you where you should be going and what direction.
Amen to that. You know, it's funny because that's exactly why we wrote the Journey Principles book. And honestly, we just we'll launch a new book in the spring, which I haven't told too many folks about, called Build the Owner from Within, which might be perfect for those that are listening to your show, just because of what you just said about, you know, most of them kind of stumbled on their calling or their business in some aspects. So that might actually be a really good thing for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, this past weekend, we had a live taping of Savvy for the first time in Manhattan. And the person we interviewed was just that sort of person. Bryn Johnson had started a wonderful marketing consulting business. She did fab at it, but it wasn't her true passion. And then she kind of just said one day, what is my heart telling me that I just want to jump out of bed every day and do? And it turned out to be matching people up with their perfect career. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to hear more about what led you to pen your book, The Journey Principles, 10 Simple Principles for a Life Journey That Matters. What do you hope people will take away from reading your book, and why did you pen it?
Well, I tell you what, I've been unbelievably blessed by the pace in which the book is actually flying off the shelves. And I think it's because of the testimonies that we're actually getting. So it's funny because, honestly, the book's not about me. Mm-hmm. It's about the reader. I share part of my personal journey along with my parents and some other stuff in there to kind of, show how to connect the dots, if you will, mm-hmm. showing how each thing has a personal piece. But really, those that are reading the book and those that have actually, been so kind as to leave, comments on Amazon, mm-hmm. They're telling us awesome things. For example, we have people we call the Journey Principles Nation, which are, people that either follow us on our social media streams or they bought the book and read the book, gave us a testimony, or message us or email us to a prayer hotline, all this kind of stuff. And this is what they're saying. Mm-hmm. So I had a woman recently who just lost her husband, been married 37 years and lost her husband to cancer. Mm. She was actually contemplating suicide because she didn't know how to live without her husband. They were so tied together that they just didn't, that she could not understand how she could have a purpose on the planet without being beside her husband. Mm. And allowing her to see through her own journey, what allowed her to see, applying God's principles to her life as a whole. Mm. And then the next thing you know, she's sending us things and she's telling us about all the cool things she's doing and how she's now helping other people with the pain that she actually suffered. So we had one person who lost her spouse. We have another woman recently who actually, her husband unfortunately made the mistake of being unfaithful and their marriage ended. Mm-hmm. And she was starting all over from scratch. Was really unsure where to go and what to do. And, so each chapter is laid out with a specific challenge, a specific thing in life that we're all going to face at some level or another, at some time or another. And it's designed to get us unstuck, and to make sure that once we are unstuck, we're not just standing still being unstuck. We're actually moving in a direction that's going to breathe life into our hearts and our minds and that kind of thing. We recently had another young woman who was 18 and dealing with depression and things of that nature. And, those are all things that I've actually personally dealt with. And what really led me to really pen the book was actually to focus on, where was I at? I stopped asking questions like, why me? And started asking questions like, how can I grow? How can I learn? What impact can I go and make because of this information? All of these, all those women that we mentioned earlier, all have one thing in common, and it's all the perception of the obstacle. See, once we can actually switch our minds to the proper perspective, then we can truly make the obstacle part of us and a stepping stone to a new level. The secret to the Journey Principles book is not about me. It's truly about you, the reader. I mean, it really is. Mm-hmm. It's about identifying with what's in your heart right now that you're struggling with. What's in your heart that needs attention. Not saying anyone's bad, good, or evil. It's literally saying, hey, look, we all are in need of more growth every day. And that won't stop until our time on earth is kind of done. So, everyone knows someone who deals with any number of items: depression, fear, anxiety, confusion. And to be honest, this book can help a lot of readers just because of that various thing. And, it's honestly, at first that was kind of my passion and that's what I believed. Mm-hmm. But it's been more important to see what other people believe and what they're writing in the comment sections on Amazon and some of the other, online bookstores that are really kind of really honestly pushing these books off the shelves. I've got people that are buying 5 and 6 or 7 of them because they've read it themselves and now they're sharing it with friends and family. And I can't do anything but feel honored and humbled by that. Yeah. That's God. That's not Stephen Scoggins. That's not the Journey Principles. That's him. That's his healing power. And that's his bringing to life an awakening and an understanding and a quickening of the soul. And I had to walk that journey myself to fully understand the gravity of that weight. And then once I walked it, there was no way in the world I could not do something about it, not put pen to paper, not put something together to just share my heart, be vulnerable people, and just tell them how God really took it. And he turned it around. He made it awesome. I've been blessed to own several businesses now. Mm-hmm. And the largest one I actually started while I was actually homeless, while starting this journey, to a multi-million-dollar organization here in 3 states in the United States. I mean, it's crazy what he can do if we'll just stop asking, God, why me? Yeah. And start asking, God, what do you want me to learn from this? Yeah. How do you want me to grow? What is it you want me to share with people? How can I take what I'm going through, learn from it, adapt from it, figure out a new way of life, a new perception, a new way of thinking, and take that and catapult me to what you really want me to do.
I'm loving what you're hearing there, because I think we often go for the moment we're stuck, the moment we have crisis, we go straight to God saying, why are you doing this to me? What did I do wrong? Aren't I a good Christian? Aren't I a good person? Or even if you're not a Christian, you're like, well, I'm a good person. Why is this happening to me? And what I'm getting from you is that the challenges are not put here as a way to be a curse upon us, but really a blessing, that if you take it and ask different questions, how can I serve? What is this trying to tell me? Why am I stuck? Asking better questions to help you on the road towards being unstuck.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That is the essence of the journey principles. That's funny because you're not going to believe this, but I actually wrote the majority of the book while on an elliptical at the gym.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I was fresh out of my own restarting, if you will. I was restarting my entire life. And there's more about that in the book for sure. I'll let everybody kind of read up on it. But, in that starting process, I was asking myself these questions. At first my mind triggered to, why me? And then it became, God was like, it's not about why you. He's like, why don't you ask me a different question? And I said, well, what question would you have me ask? He said, why don't you ask me what it is you can learn from this? And then I started asking a whole series of questions, and then I couldn't stop. So the book kind of became that essence. It forced me to kind of go back and look at all of my influences over the course of my life. Not having a mother and a father, a large part of my life, not really having a stable income, having to drop out of high school at an early age, being homeless, almost taking my life. All those things had a purpose. And what most people do is they literally allow the nails of their past to pierce them to a cross of their own, the choosing, not realizing that one's already paid that price. And what he came to do is he came to give life and joy and all those kinds of things that are associated with a life of forward. See, death is in the past. Life is in the future. So trying to get these people to understand these very simple things. Yeah. The secret to any obstacle is the obstacle either owns you or you own them. And if you can own them, then they become part of you. They become part of your DNA, part of your essence, part of your training tool, part of your stair to your next level, to your next thing that you've got. I heard a pastor one time, T.D. Jakes, actually say that new levels require new devils. You got to beat up the first devil first before you go to the new level. So you gotta own those obstacles. You gotta take accountability for them. If you had a responsibility, then you need to ask yourself, what was it that led me to this decision making? What was it that led me to this air of grace? What was it that led me to this place to make this decision, or to be part of this relationship, or to be part of this business, or, any number of things. It's all, what is my perception? What am I perceiving? See, you're either looking at life through the four walls of a box, or you learn to look at life above the box and what surrounds the box, not just the box itself.
Yeah, and what I'm getting from you is that the moment that you stop resisting whatever obstacle is in your path and say, I'm going to take ownership of this and take responsibility for whatever actions or thoughts or words I took to help bring this about. Because some people will say, well, I had nothing to do with losing my job or whatever. A number of years ago, that actually happened to me. I had been downsized out of a business, and I was really, really, really angry, thinking I was pretty darn awesome at this job. How could they let me go? Led me to realize, hey, this was not working. I had to take a different course of action. But it only can come about if you stop resisting and saying, what part am I playing in this, and what can I do differently? And at that point, I started praying a lot, and it really helped get clear on the path going forward. Now, here's the interesting thing. I don't know if we want to go there, is that sometimes God won't give you all the pieces at once, because, if we knew all the pieces leading up to our journey, we might not take it.
That's right.
So sometimes we get, a step or two in front of us, and we're like, well, God, no, I want to see the whole picture. How is it going to look at the end? And sometimes you just have to go in faith and know that, all the steps will be there when you get there.
That's right. Absolutely. No, that's absolutely the case. I've learned through my own journey, through my own walk, that when God leaves out the blanks, or he puts a blank in a scenario, or he leaves out a couple of stairs, it's because you're supposed to learn right then. That is when you're supposed to focus most on growth. That's when he's saying, child, ask me what it is you want to learn from this. Ask me what it is I want you to know about this. And I can keep you from walking 40 days or 40 years in a desert to 40 days in a faith walk. Mm-hmm. If you would just ask me the right questions, I will totally help you out with that. You know? Yeah. So I'm totally on point with that. Anytime I've ever experienced it, I mean, when I experience it now when I'm coaching folks or sharing about the journey principles or traveling the country speaking or any of that stuff, what we're doing is that's the primary thing is we're focusing on, you know, God, okay, I have a blank. This means I need to grow. That's what it means. Yeah. That's all he's saying. He says yes, no, and wait. And wait means grow. So you're absolutely right. No, you're absolutely on point. No, for sure that.
Yeah. So possibly asking, what do I need to learn from this? What are you meaning that I should get from this particular situation or experience?
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, you're definitely on point. You and I are speaking the same language.
And for me also, I don't know if this came about in your journey, but for me, often my most difficult crisis or difficult moments, what ended up happening is when things turned around is that moment when I finally had that switch inside of me where I surrendered. And it's such a hard word to describe because it's not like a giving up, which it feels like. It's kind of like, I'm just going to trust you, Lord. I just know you're going to get this. But it's this kind of release. So that you can be receiving the gifts from God. And have you experienced that?
Oh yeah, no doubt. You know, it's funny because you know, pride in and of itself is putting self above everything else. And humility, in a weird way, and kind of almost by definition, humility is dying to self to a certain standard. You know, there's a positive pride, which is the pride of taking pride in the quality of your work and being happy with what you've done. That's an essence of worship, saying, hey, look, I've done well. Here's my offering, kind of thing. And then there's the pride that basically says, hey, I know everything there is to know, and I don't need to know anything, and no one can tell me anything. I already know it all. And that pride typically leads you to a massive humbling. You know, and then you got humility where it's you finally understand that dying to self and serving others is really what life's all really truly about, and trying to figure out how your passions help serve others. And then you have the other side of humility where it's like, hey, look, I don't want to be a doormat.
Exactly.
And I think that's why we all struggle with it, with both pride and humility, because it's always in the middle somewhere.
Yeah. That's a really tough one, Stephen, because a lot of us on the call listening in today and to the podcast are coaches, consultants, that sort of thing. And a lot of them tell me they go through this kind of difficulty that, hey, I want to serve. I feel this is my calling, but how do I make a business out of it? It's icky if I ask people for money. I should just be able to help them. Like, there's that weird point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What would you tell them about working through that?
You know, it's funny because a great coach is going to ask a lot of questions and listen a lot. You know, when I first started doing coaching a long time ago, I really wanted to do well. You know, I had a lot of information that I wanted to share, and I realized that sometimes I was hitting people with a fire hose. You know, I could connect the dots. I could see ahead of them a little bit. I could see kind of what they were going through, what the attributes may be, what are the challenges they may face. And all the while, I hadn't got past the first stumbling block, which was them as a person or myself as a person. You see, if we project pride, if we project the fact that we know it all as coaches, if we project the fact that we have every answer, then what happens is it comes back to us almost like a mirror function. You know, the people begin to shut down. You know, it's hard to work through pride.
Yeah.
All you need to do is ask key questions. One of my John Maxwell friends actually, says he doesn't call them probing questions. He calls them, they're almost like what if questions. What if you could do all that you wanted to do and have the things that you want to have in life if you read this one book? What if this book actually had all your missing components in it? Would you read it? Most people are like, well, yeah. But if you go say, well, you need to read this book because it's going to answer all your questions.
What's more powerful?
Exactly. Because you're taking them out of it.
It's all
so that's pride on our side as coaches, and then trying to get through pride on their side is literally I've found that relationship building rapport. And if I have to spend the first 6 sessions building nothing but rapport to allow them to open up in such a way that we can actually speak into each other's lives, then I will do that for the first 6 sessions.
Yeah. And you mentioned about if this was the book that could change your life and answer all your questions, would you read it? And I found that interesting because years ago, someone did me a beautiful blessing. I was going through a problem with boyfriend problems. And a woman came over to me and said, I had this book. I felt a need to give it to you. One sec. Wow.
I've got my iMessage dinging like crazy. So
I had a woman who gave me a beautiful blessing of a book, and she said, I need you to read this. I felt called to give it to you. And I said, oh, okay. And I put it in the drawer at my office and left it there for a couple months. And one day I just felt the need, I want to read something. And I was like, this is the only thing I have. It looks like a romance. I don't want to read it. But I'll read it. And it was actually a really cool book. It's called God on a Harley. And it was about Jesus coming to spend the week with the woman going through boyfriend problems and
awesome.
and relationship problems and helping her through it. So it was like Jesus showing up on her doorstep on a Harley, spending the week with her. And the person's name in the book was Christine, and I'm Christina. and literally, I almost threw the book across the floor, across the room, when the questions she asked were the exact questions I prayed to God about. I was like, oh,
So Christina was talking to Christina.
That's right. It was very, very airy, but God does that.
Think about it. That's what a great book does. Mm-hmm. You don't read it; it reads you. And, the Bible is the best version of that for sure. That I can read 7 or 8, 10 different scriptures over and over again. They say something to me each time I read them, depending on where I'm at in my life at that moment. Mm-hmm. And that's why the Journey Principles book was built just like that. Mm. That's why when people ask me all the time, it used to be the hardest thing. People come to me, well, what's the book about? And I'd be like, well, it's about this, it's about that, it's about this. And they would look at me like, oh, it sounds like a good read. And then it dawned on me, God's like, no. The book's not about so and so and so and so and so and so. The book's about them. Mm. It's about them. Some people began coming to me and asking me, well, what's the book about? I would say, the book's about you. Mm. And I would say, what are you going through right now? And they would tell me a story, and I would be like, yeah, I think chapter 9 will help. Yeah, I think chapter 4 will help. Mm. And lo and behold, they give me testimonies after the fact, and it did help.
Yeah.
That's that pride thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Because really, this book was written by God through you, so God could reach people going through whatever crisis they're going through to bring them back to Him. So
amen to that.
Yeah. Absolute blessing.
Absolutely.
So there are so many people who look to find peace and happiness in their lives and success, and it kind of eludes them. Why do you think this happens to so many people?
It's funny because we've actually been talking about it for like the last 10 minutes or so.
Oh, wow, yeah.
The biggest hindrance I see as I travel around the country and speaking and sharing and book signings and all this kind of stuff is the pride of the spirit. Over and over again, pride is the most difficult thing to overcome. It is the very same thing that led Satan to fall from heaven. Mm. Yeah. I will be like the Most High.
Yeah.
I will put myself on a pedestal above others, and nobody can talk to me.
Mm. And you know what the sad part is, Stephen? I think it's a weird thing. I think people reach out for pride so much because I talk to a lot of people, and there's really this non-self-confidence, this how should you call it? They don't have any confidence in themselves, so they try to build themselves up by this kind of false, like, oh, I'm so amazing. Oh, look, I got 10 new clients this week and I made $10,000 in one day. Aren't I amazing? But really, underneath that all is this unworthiness.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's really like, this kind of false pride in a sense, in that it's not even real because they don't really believe it in themselves.
Oh, and that's absolutely true. It's funny. I was at one of my most loneliest moments is when I had actually made my first, we'll call it $1 million. I had everything, God had blessed me in such a way that I literally had every physical thing that I'd ever really kind of truly desired or that I thought I desired. Mm-hmm. And I found myself more empty at that moment than I did when I was homeless. As strange as that sounds. Mm-hmm. And it's because of that very same thing. See, a lot of overachievers, including myself, type A's, high D's, high DIs, that kind of thing, like I am, a lot of us, we learn to strive for excellence and strive for more because we tie our self-esteem to that.
Mm-hmm.
We feel like if we're not striving, if we're not doing, if we're not helping, if we're not doing, that our life doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the hardest thing in the world to understand that God loved me before I even loved myself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
And that he's that way about everybody. Mm-hmm. He loves them even though if they don't love themselves. And he's so patient. He's unbelievably patient. He could come in here and clean house as it stands right now, but he's not willing to lose one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, his patience level with us is ridiculous. I mean, it's like, you know, you can't take any father of a child and put him in the same patience level as God. However, when you understand the patience of a solid father and a son or a daughter, then you can actually understand the patience of God. And why, you know, when we skin our knees, he's the first one there to say, "Come here, baby. Let me help you out." Or we're about to go stick our finger in a light socket, you know, yell at us and say, "Don't do that."
Uh-huh.
You know, he's like the perfect parent.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, literally, I'm telling you, pride is the biggest hindrance in anyone's life. And it comes from low self-esteem typically. Yeah. They're trying to prove themselves to themselves. They're looking at themselves in the mirror. And what they tell people on the outside is not how they feel on the inside. And I think every human on this planet deals with it at a certain extent.
Oh, yeah.
You know, everybody learns to grow from it, cope with it, so to speak. And that's why there's a lot of relationships that don't really work. You know, you have arrogance that runs rampant through men, more men than I've seen in my personal experience in women. Mm-hmm. But it runs rampant because the man has always been taught. Mm-hmm. When he was growing up, his sphere of influence always said, you need to do this and be this, otherwise you don't matter.
Wow.
And then a woman, on the other hand, the same very thing. Her mother, her father says, you need to do this, be this, or you don't matter. Yeah. So we spend our entire lives chasing things that don't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So true. So true. And all the time trying to get that journey back to self. I mean, real self, our true self that God loves, not this false self that, you know, is the ego, but our true self that is meant to serve other man, serve God, and get back to our relationship with God. I think because I talk to so many people where there's that struggle, there's some void, there's something missing, and it's that relationship, that communion.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the most important thing. I've been fulfilled the last few years because of the God the Father, not because of anything I own, any book that's been written, any speaking engagement. You know, it's funny because we were talking about relationships a minute ago. Yeah. I recently got married in December of this past year.
Yay. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. She's an amazing woman. She really is. I got very fortunate to marry up. I will tell you that I did not see her and I did not know her until I was already the right person. Yeah. See, people like to focus on trying to be the right person for someone rather than being the right person for themselves and letting God actually do that. You know, letting him work through that, letting him show you who you are in Christ. You know, you're beautifully and wonderfully made. Brian and myself went out to a railroad track yesterday to record some new video footage. We tend to love railroad tracks at the Journey Principles because of the journey. You know, but we went out there yesterday and we talked a lot about this one question. And it'll be on YouTube shortly, but here's the question. Who told you you weren't good enough? Mm-hmm. Who told you? Was it a parent? Was it a coach? Was it a boyfriend? You know, was it a girlfriend? Was it a family member? Who told you you weren't good enough? God has never told anyone they're not good enough. Mm-hmm. He actually gave his son because we were good enough in his eyes, not in man's eyes. He thought we were worth saving. Yeah. Hey. We may never understand the full weight of that, but it's heavy. Yeah. You know, so I ask everyone out there listening to just think for just a moment. Has anyone ever told you you weren't good enough? And then I want the person to actually think about the influence. Why did that matter so much? Why did that matter so much? And why are we stuck not being able to get past that? You know, getting unstuck and then really kind of understanding oneself is the heart of the Journey Principles. Both the whole Journey Principles Institute, which is the business organization, which is, well, they have, you know, other authors and speakers and stuff, and the book in and of itself. You see, here's the cool thing. If we can get people to understand how God sees them, how Christ saw them and sees them, if they can understand that, then they can understand their purpose, their passion, and their calling. And then they get, T.D. Jakes once said, you're perfect at your purpose. You're not perfect at anything else but your purpose. Well, so when you actually understand your purpose, passion, and calling, then you're now perfect in Christ's eyes. And then you are now prepared to be basically the best catapult of what I call a heavenly Facebook, if you will. Because now you're touching lives everywhere. You're sharing, you're getting likes, you're getting shares. You're sharing healing. Think about someone who's went through a great deal of hurt. Maybe they were molested, maybe they're physical abuse, maybe verbal abuse, which a lot of times can be more detrimental than even physical abuse. They went through homelessness, they went through not having parents, they went through siblings being torn apart, death at an early age, anxiety, depression. Think about all that stuff for just a second. What if that person can have that healing on their life, have that eradicated and erased? Do you realize that everything that comes out of that person's mouth from that day forward will actually be of a healing content and not hurt? See, every person that's hurting on the inside, they have no choice. They know no other way. They have no other understanding, no other perspective than to constantly perpetuate hurt, which is why you can have a father who was an alcoholic growing up, who also had a mom or a father who was an alcoholic growing up, and who now has a daughter who hates alcohol, but is also anxiety and depressed and deals with depression or some eating disorders or a number of things. It's the perpetual hurt. So if we can get everybody to grab a book, spend time working on themselves, I'm telling you, the coaches out there would begin to share in a way that is anointed and awaken this USA like no one's ever been before. I'm telling you, healing is the way. Once we understand how Christ sees us, once we understand what we're supposed to be in his eyes, then the healing really starts to take hold of our very soul. Our awakening starts to happen. The quickening starts to happen. And the next thing you know, you are now pouring out of your mouth and out of your pores life, healing, aspirations, which impacts somebody else.
I love it, Stephen. What I'm loving here is I often hear from out in the coaching world and in that arena that I want to, how should you say, I'm going to create abundance, or, I'm looking to attract wealth and all this stuff, all of the attraction, abundance and all that stuff. And I think to myself, what you're saying right here, it's not about attracting. God has all the things he wants to give you, all the things that if you were to let go of all of the stuff that isn't you could be ready to receive it. It's not about you trying to attract and bring all this stuff to you.
That's right.
You just have to have your heart open to God, letting him, being open to receive what God has to give you.
Amen to that. It's funny because, I get asked a lot, actually on a lot of podcasts, a lot of shows, about wealth and abundance and about, because being homeless and then building a multi-million-dollar business and then starting two others and a nonprofit and all this kind of stuff. I get asked a lot, how did you do it? How did you attract it? I said, it's not so much about attracting the abundance.
Yeah.
It's being ready for it.
Yeah.
See, any good blessing of any kind is a waste if our character and our integrity is not strong enough to use the blessing to better a life of another person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
your
that's
character truly defines what you can receive.
Yeah, and we've heard about the people who won lottos and such and big game prizes, and they lose it in no time, and they're in more debt than before they even won that huge prize, and a bunch of problems and issues that they didn't have before. So you're right. If you're not ready for the blessing, you don't want it before. Like you said, your wife came to you when you were the right person, when you were ready to receive it.
It's funny. I lost my first business. I didn't talk about that a lot until I wrote the Journey Principles. And I didn't talk about it a lot because I was still dealing with it. I had to come to terms with the fact that I lost my first business because I wasn't the man I needed to be in order to have a blessed business. I wasn't the man I needed to be. I was very prideful, very arrogant. I had something to prove. My whole self-esteem was tied up in how much money I could make because, I grew up in a poverty level. I dropped out of high school because to take care of my family because my dad was having trouble with the bills. So then, I get this awesome opportunity. The guy literally gives me a business, tools, equipment, everything, to start a construction company, literally hands it to me on a silver platter. And then I went from making basically nothing to almost $70,000 to $100,000 a year between bonuses and compensation, all this kind of stuff in a year's time, only to be homeless a year later because of the humbling that had to happen.
Mm.
I'm convinced that one of the reasons that I've been blessed to operate and own blessed businesses at this point is because I finally realized something that is spoken in truth. And Zig Ziglar said it best. And every coach needs to hear this. You ready?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yes, I'm ready.
Be positive.
Yes.
All right. Here's what it is. Zig Ziglar said it best. If you build the people will build the business.
Mm. Yeah.
You know what that word is? You know what that whole statement is in one word? Discipleship.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
Think about it. So Jesus goes for 40 days. He goes and works on himself. He goes and gets prepared for his ministry. He didn't jump into his ministry. He didn't jump into his quote business. He didn't jump into that. What he did was he went and got prepared. The next thing he did was he came back and cast a vision. I will make you fishers of men. That best vision statement on the planet. Build others. I will make you fishers of men. Then he gave them a mission statement. Go and make disciples of all the nations of the earth.
Mm.
Every illustrated point of owning and operating a business, coaching, teaching, all of that, every bit of it has been actually illustrated in the embodiment of Christ.
Mm.
Every blessed business I know has that one thing in common, is that they focus on the people within the organization. So every coach that's out there, if their sole intent is to actually better the life of the other person, then what will happen is they'll end up knocking their goals down by accident because they're so focused on their own personal growth, because that is what's going to make them a better coach, a better counselor, a better teacher. See, Jesus did speak a lot, but you know how much content that wasn't recording in the Bible? I'm sure that just sitting down with him at every dinner every night was.
Mm.
He listened. The reason the Pharisees and the Sadducees couldn't trap him is because he listened.
Mm. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And
who should pay taxes? Well, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Render unto God what is God's. He listened to the intent behind the question.
Mm. I like that you're mentioning this, because when I talk to a lot of coaches, they say, well, I just want to serve people. I can't possibly make a business out of it. I want to just serve. But I think what's getting in the way there is ego, because they're thinking about, I don't want to hurt people. I'm not worthy to take money. But really, it's not about taking money, not taking money. If you're providing value from what I'm getting from you, people will want to give you something of value for that. So it's not like you'll have to force it out of them, because if you're coming from a servitude spirit, it won't be that you're taking from people. It'll be that you are giving, and you are coming from a place of your heart, and, not from this place of, oh my God, ickiness, I took money for it.
That's right. Amen to that. It's funny because a good friend, John Maxwell, and I get to say good friend because he told me we could all call him a good friend. So he said this one thing. And he was trying to prepare. I'm friends with a lot of John Maxwell coaches, certified coaches. I am one myself. I believe in John's message. I believe in what he does. I will say that for whatever reason, God's placed me in a different avenue. But I talk to their team on a regular basis. He said something interesting to me that really took me by storm, because another good friend or another good group of folks is the folks at Lampo, Dave Ramsey's place, and what they talk about is where there's no margin, there's no ministry. And that was true. It really was. You can't minister to others unless there's a certain level of margin, so you can keep investing in yourself and investing in tools that help other people. So that was true. Well, something changed in me when John said this. He said, you should never ask anybody to pay for something that you haven't already provided a value for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it changed the way in which I do it. So I give free sessions all the time. I want it to be a good fit. I want them to see me in such a way that they can see themselves through their own lens, through their own eyes, and see a way in which our coming together, our teaching, our time together can somehow better their own life. And because I pick up stuff, I learn new stuff all day long. I love to ask questions. I love people. I like to figure out what makes them tick to a certain extent. I like helping them connect the dots.
Yeah.
But we only do that by focusing on them and not on ourselves.
Exactly. And I think some people I talk to, I get two roads. Some coaches saying, well, I just want to give as much value as possible. And then you find them giving away the whole kitchen sink in a way to say, I just want to give you everything. And it's like a diarrhea of information. And the people just feel overwhelmed, like, okay, I'm going to leave now.
That's right.
And again, the energy behind either giving too much or giving too little because you're scared that you're going to give it all away is both coming from a lack mentality of of not believing in yourself, not having self-worth, and thinking that there's not enough to go around.
That's right. That's very true. It's interesting because what I found that actually works, at least for myself and the coaches we have here on staff, is one simple rule. We set a plan.
Mm-hmm.
We know that we want to give a certain amount. So we actually have a plan in action of what we're going to give. So it's predetermined. And we tell the folks on the front end, hey, look, we want to make sure that what we offer is what you need, and what you and who you need to become also comes from what we have to offer.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing this is a relationship, it's a two-way street. The more vulnerable you'll be with us, the more vulnerable we can then be with you specifically.
Yeah.
So we focus on this thing where it's like, literally, we have these packages where you get one or two things at no charge to make sure the culture matches.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of go from there. And then they know it's predetermined. It's like, okay, you get this for free. And after this, hey, if it doesn't work out, I'm okay with that. You guys, please go find someone that can help you. And to be honest, if you have a coach out there that's kind of done that and they've lost some folks, or someone else has decided to go somewhere elsewhere or decide not to do coaching at all, it's a good time to definitely, make sure your personal growth pattern is where you want it to be. But it's even a more important time to make sure you don't take that personally.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been my experience that people are in a lot of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them don't know they're in pain. A lot of them have become so accustomed to coping and not dealing with the hurts and things in their life that's going to be required for them to grow,
mm-hmm.
that they avoid all essence of it. So the moment they start getting growth, they actually walk because they are growing.
Mm-hmm. It scares them. They're not ready to go there. Yeah.
It does. I'm a firm believer. And the reason I could say that is because I can tell you that when I was growing, I literally call it growing through something.
Mm-hmm.
When I was growing through this journey, I wouldn't have wished it on my worst enemy. It was incredibly painful, but it was far worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I'm hearing from you is that you go out with a structured plan with the person you're going to talk to in mind, but with a goal and plan to help them. And if it doesn't work, they go on their merry way, and then you help the next person.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you can't take it personally. You're called to share with those that God puts in front of you. Whether it's for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, you're still called to share with them for that moment. And you put your heart out there.
Yeah.
If you're going to be a coach and you want to actually coach, mentor, and teach and encourage other people, if you really want to make a difference, you will have to be transparent, you will have to be vulnerable, and you will have to care about their interest. And then you will have to have some thick skin, knowing that if they walk, it's what God has asked them to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned a good point there, vulnerable and open, because I get a lot from coaches, and it's even hard for me. I'm not a coach. I'm a talk show host, but at the beginning of my business, I talked a lot about mistakes I've made. And part of my show is people sharing their lessons learned. And it's a hard thing for people to come forward with. And people even said to me, are you nuts? I mean, by putting out your vulnerabilities and the things you messed up on, you're going to make it so people will never want to be on your show and want to be a part of it. And I found that to not be true, that people want to be with real people. People want to talk to a coach who is real, who has made mistakes, who is vulnerable, who's open, who says, hey, I screwed up. I lost my first business and I went bankrupt.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. See, because people have hidden things they don't like to share with the world because they've been trained not to share it.
Yeah.
And what happens when someone like yourself or other coaches and whatnot take on the responsibility of being transparent and vulnerable, what happens is they can now see their life inside of yours. And what they do is that especially if your life is taking a turn for the better, they can now see that as being a potential outcome for them, which helps them take another step.
Yeah.
I was on a radio show not too terribly long ago, a syndicated Christian radio show, and they were talking about specifically the transparency and the vulnerability. And they were even asking me, he goes, why on earth would you be so transparent and so vulnerable in a book where millions of people are going to potentially see it? Why would you do such a thing? Mm-hmm. And then I said, the best source of healing always comes from the best source of testimony. Mm. The best source of testimony always comes from truth.
Yeah.
Which requires us to be vulnerable and transparent. Truth comes no other way than being truthful. And to be truthful, it requires transparency and vulnerability. Big time.
Yeah, yeah. And you also mentioned that you might get some gripe or negative comments back, because I had heard from one of my past mentors that get ready, as you continue to grow, you will get some
Oh, absolutely.
some non-fans. Some people will be kind of rude or nasty, and it comes with the territory. As you said before, it's not something to take personally because it's something they're going through. It's their stuff, not yours.
Oh, and that's the absolute truth. I occasionally speak at schools for kids because I have a heart. I was bullied growing up, so I have a heart for the anti-bullying movement. The only difference is I don't focus on the bullied kid as much as I do the bully. You see, I help the bullies understand. In fact, the last one that we did was actually in Georgia, not too really in Savannah. I was a school called Godly Station School. And one of the things that I had that at the end of it, I actually had a bully come up on stage, confess of being a bully, and repent of being a bully in front of 200 kids.
God bless him.
And it's because he understood his perspective. He understood that he didn't feel great about himself. So he would try to exercise control and empowerment over others. And that happens all the way through adulthood. Mm-hmm. I first started this whole mission of journey principles in the book and everything. I didn't know at my core, I didn't know what God had planned. Now he's blowing me away with what he's doing. I mean, it's awe inspiring each day from him. It blows my mind. But the interesting thing about it is I realized, because I started getting what they call trolls, and I'm sure you're familiar with them, with people that'll put a nasty comment on a blog for no reason.
Yes.
Or say something negative for no reason. You don't even know the person.
Yeah.
So what I've done is I've intentionally decided to say something nice back to them.
Good.
And a lot of them have actually been, quote, converted into believers.
Awesome.
Because they don't understand what they don't understand. They were taught to ridicule those that had potential. And they were taught to ridicule others that had potential because no one ever told them about the potential they had in themselves.
Yeah.
They didn't know it. They didn't understand it. They didn't know that they had a purpose. They didn't know they had a calling. They didn't know they had a passion. One thing my dad used to say, and he was, missed a huge chunk of my life, where he and I are very close now, but, in that early stages, he used to tell me, I was about 9 or 12 when I started working in construction, and he would say, well, if you just make $14 an hour, you'll do really well, get a family, I'm like, Dad, I just don't, I in my spirit, in my soul, that just tells me that's not truth.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. And this is in my childhood. I've always felt a need to encourage and share with other people and hopefully inspire them to make a decision for themselves. They've got one life on earth, and they can impact millions of people if they would just do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of times I heard of children say, hey, when I was a kid, I was already teaching people, or when I was a kid, I was already baking in the kitchen. A lot of the times your passion is already is noticed as a child. If you go back and look at what did you most love doing as a kid, you found you're already doing your greatest passion as a kid sometimes. That's
absolutely true. Like I said, that's one of the things we always start with when what we call our life assessments. And I'm going to put those up on our website as soon as it's done. We're literally rebuilding two websites thanks to Google, changing the platforms where everything has to be mobile friendly now. So thank you, Google. But when that goes up, I'm going to put a tool out, and it's called a life assessment tool. It's not a DISC personality profile. It's not a strengths finder. It's more of a passion finder and connecting the dots, showing people how to go from their passions, who they need forgiveness from, who they need to forgive, some of their growth patterns, what they want out of life, and helping them connect the dots so they understand what their calling and purpose is. So we'll put that up, and I'm probably going to make that a free resource. And any of your coaches out there are welcome to use it once it's up and running.
Well, tell our community how we can get in touch with you, work with you, and all your team.
Well, we have lots of ways. Like I said, I mentioned the fact of rebuilding websites. So please, if you go to the websites, they don't look as pretty as I want them to look. Don't get mad. But the easiest way is you can visit me at StephenScoggins.com. That's with a PH. So StephenScoggins.com. We're launching the brand new JourneyPrinciples.com website. I'm hoping next month. I'm hoping at the beginning of June we'll have that up and running, and there'll be all kinds of tools, resources there for people. You can also follow us on the JP Nation and on Facebook. Again, Stephen Scoggins with a PH. You'll find that we have about 30,000 followers as of today, which is awesome since we just started it 3 months ago. So
awesome.
Twitter, W_Scoggins. I mean, if you name social media, we're probably out there. You can search me right now by Stephen Scoggins. We'll be working on our branding of sorts for the Journey Principles. Make sure you go get a copy of the Journey Principles book, please.
Yes.
It'll bless you. I know it will. And if it doesn't, send me a note and I'll send you some money.
Oh.
Because I cannot believe the impact it's making on the testimonies. I mean, I was in tears 3 days ago because of the testimonies we're getting. I mean, it's incredible. Marriage is saved, suicide's preventing, healing's been restored. It's not something that is a difficult read, and it's not something that I don't feel like is going to be not worth somebody's time actually reading and spending time in personal growth. I really believe that with all my heart. We've been transparent and vulnerable throughout the whole thing, and we just want to help people. We honestly want to do that, and I hope I was able to add some value to your show today. And
you were, yeah, you were. I can see God working through you and your book, and it's such a blessing. Thank you so much for writing it and coming out here and sharing your wisdom and your gifts with our audience. I thank you so much, Stephen. But before we head on out, is there any last word you'd like to leave with our audience?
The last words of advice is just focus on growth. Mm-hmm. Focus on growth. Come on, go get it.
Go get it.
Seriously, go get it. Don't wait. Yeah. Every day that you wait to really start your journey, really focus on growth, really focus on not what you want to be, but who you want to be, what character attributes you have, what integrity you have. What are the defining things in your life? When you learn to focus on those things as growth items, you're going to knock stuff down by accident in a good way.
Yeah. I love that you say that, Stephen, because I heard someone say to me just yesterday, I'll do that when. I said, no, not when, now. Because tomorrow might not be here. It is never promised. So don't wait for tomorrow. Do it today.
The first step is always the best step. It's always the most difficult step, but it's always the right step.
Awesome. Well, everyone, please go get the Journey Principles today. And thank you, Stephen, for coming to Savvy Central Radio and sharing all your gifts and wisdom with us.
It was my honor and his wisdom, so thank you very much.
Savvy Central Radio is home to over 100,000 listeners per month globally and runs in syndication on 8 AM and FM platforms, including iHeartRadio and 6 podcasting platforms. To find out more about our paid sponsorship opportunities or to become a guest and find out how we can help you get your message out to the world, call 718 area code 713-2289 or email at savvycentralradio@gmail.com.